What if I told you that Hollywood's golden age was built on one of the biggest lies in entertainment history? Behind those perfect smiles and dreamy romances were secret affairs, hidden relationships, and love stories that could have destroyed careers overnight. The studios didn't just create movies, they created elaborate fantasies about their stars' personal lives. But the truth, it was far more scandalous, passionate, and heartbreaking than anything that made it to the silver screen. Ready to peek behind the curtain? Greta Garbo. She was the face that launched 1,000 fantasies, the Swedish enchantress who made audiences swoon with just one glance. But Greta Garbo's greatest performance wasn't on screen. It was the decades-long act of hiding her true self from a world that would have destroyed her for loving women. Recent biographers have speculated that Garbo was bisexual, possibly even predominantly lesbian, and the evidence is compelling. While MGM crafted her image as the ultimate mysterious beauty who drove men wild, Garbo was quietly building a life with women. Her most significant relationship was with Mercedes de Acosta, a Spanish-American writer and socialite who moved through Hollywood's elite circles like a ghost. Their affair lasted decades, conducted through passionate letters and secret meetings. De Acosta wasn't just some fling, she was Garbo's intellectual equal, a woman who understood the suffocating nature of Hollywood's closet. They traveled together, lived together when possible, and maintained their connection even when studio pressure forced them apart. The letters between them read like poetry, filled with longing and the pain of having to hide their love. But Garbo's story gets even more fascinating when you realize she was part of what Hollywood insiders called the Sewing Circle, a discreet women's club called the Sewing Circle, Hollywood's underground lesbian society. This wasn't just gossip, this was survival. Women like Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, and Barbara Stanwyck created their own secret network where they could be themselves away from the prying eyes of studio executives and gossip columnists. The tragedy of Garbo's story isn't just that she had to hide, it's that she became so skilled at hiding that she disappeared from public life entirely. After her last film in 1941, she retreated into herself, becoming the ultimate recluse. Some say the pressure of maintaining her heterosexual image while living as a lesbian broke something inside her. She spent her later years walking the streets of New York alone, a ghost of her former self. Garbo once said, "I want to be alone." And Hollywood took that as mysterious star behavior. But maybe she was just tired of pretending. Maybe she wanted to be alone because being around people meant performing a role she was exhausted of playing. The woman who gave us some of cinema's most passionate performances was never allowed to live passionately as herself. Barbara Stanwyck. If Greta Garbo was Hollywood's mysterious lesbian, Barbara Stanwyck was its pragmatic one. She didn't sulk in corners or write poetry about her forbidden love. She built one of the most successful careers in Hollywood history while quietly living her truth behind closed doors. A gay actor named Clifton Webb, who played her husband in Titanic, called Stanwyck my favorite American lesbian. But unlike some of her contemporaries, Stanwyck wasn't interested in playing games. She knew exactly what she was doing when she married gay vaudeville star Frank Fay, in what many believe was a mutually beneficial arrangement. Both got the respectability they needed, and both were free to live their real lives in private. The marriage was a disaster. Fay was reportedly abusive and controlling, but it gave Stanwyck something invaluable: a reputation as a straight woman who'd been burned by love. Perfect cover for what came next. After her divorce, Stanwyck settled into a 30-year relationship with Helen Ferguson, her publicist and closest companion. They lived together, traveled together, and built a life that looked like friendship to the outside world, but was clearly much more. What made Stanwyck different was her attitude about it all. She wasn't tormented by her sexuality like some stars, she was practical about it. When journalist Bose Hadley had the audacity to ask her directly about lesbian relationships, Stanwyck reportedly threw journalist Bose Hadley out of her house after he asked whether she had ever partaken in lesbian sex, as Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich had done. She wasn't about to play 20 questions about her private life with some gossip hound. But here's what's fascinating. Stanwyck's screen persona was built on playing tough, independent women who didn't need men to define them. Was this art imitating life? Absolutely. She brought an authenticity to roles like the manipulative Phyllis Dietrichson in Double Indemnity because she understood what it meant to live a double life. Her performances crackled with the energy of a woman who knew exactly how to get what she wanted while keeping her secrets safe. Stanwyck died in 1990, taking her secrets with her. She never confirmed or denied the rumors, never wrote a tell-all memoir, never felt the need to explain herself to anyone. In a town built on confessions and revelations, her silence was the ultimate power move. James Dean. James Dean lived fast, died young, and left behind a mystery that Hollywood still can't solve. In just 3 films, he became the ultimate symbol of rebellious youth, but his biggest rebellion might have been the one nobody saw coming. Dean's sexuality has been debated for decades, and the evidence suggests he wasn't particularly concerned with labels. He dated women, had relationships with men, and seemed to approach love with the same intensity he brought to everything else. But in 1950s Hollywood, that kind of sexual fluidity was career suicide. The rumors started early. Dean was spotted frequently with older men, including his mentor, director Nicholas Ray. Their relationship went beyond professional. Ray cast Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, and many believe their connection was deeply personal. Dean lived with Ray for a while, and their dynamic was intense enough to raise eyebrows in a town that was used to unconventional relationships. Then there were the stories about Dean's time in New York before he hit it big. He allegedly supported himself through relationships with older men, including television producer Rogers Brackett. This wasn't just gossip. Multiple sources confirmed that Dean lived with Brackett and that their relationship was romantic. Dean was practical about it. He needed support to survive as a struggling actor, and Brackett was willing to provide it. But Dean wasn't just using people. Those who knew him described someone who was genuinely passionate, someone who fell hard and fast regardless of gender. He had a relationship with Italian actress Pier Angeli that seemed genuine, but he was also linked to actor Sal Mineo, his co-star in Rebel Without a Cause. The age difference was concerning. Mineo was just 16, but their connection was undeniable. What made Dean dangerous wasn't just his sexuality, it was his refusal to hide it completely. He was careless in a way that would have destroyed other careers. He was seen at gay bars, made little effort to hide his relationships with men, and seemed to think his talent would protect him from scandal. Maybe it would have. Dean died in 1955 at age 24, just as he was becoming a major star. His death in that car crash froze him in time as the ultimate rebel, but it also protected him from the scrutiny that would have come with a longer career. We'll never know how he would have navigated the pressures of being a major star with fluid sexuality in an unforgiving industry. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich didn't just blur the lines between masculine and feminine, she obliterated them entirely. Long before anyone was talking about gender fluidity, Dietrich was showing up to premieres in men's suits, seducing both men and women, and somehow making it all look like the most natural thing in the world. Born in Germany, Dietrich arrived in Hollywood with a reputation that preceded her. She'd already scandalized Berlin with her performances in cabaret shows, where she'd kiss women on stage and wear men's clothing. But Hollywood in the 1930s was a different beast entirely. The studios needed her to be a traditional sex symbol, even as everything about her screamed otherwise. The compromise was brilliant. They'd let her be mysterious and exotic, but they'd frame it as European sophistication rather than sexual rebellion. Dietrich played along, but on her own terms. She had highly publicized affairs with male co-stars like Gary Cooper and John Gilbert, giving the press something to write about. But behind the scenes, she was building a different kind of life entirely. Dietrich's relationship with Mercedes de Acosta, yes, the same woman who loved Greta Garbo, was passionate and tempestuous. They competed for the same women, shared lovers, and maintained a friendship that was equal parts affection and rivalry. But Dietrich also had relationships with writer Mercedes Ruehl and actress Tallulah Bankhead, creating a web of connections that linked Hollywood's lesbian underground. What made Dietrich unique was her attitude about it all. She wasn't tormented by her sexuality or her gender presentation. She was empowered by it. When she wore men's suits, she wasn't trying to hide her femininity. She was expanding the definition of what feminine could be. When she kissed women, she wasn't making a political statement. She was simply following her desires. The studios tried to control her image, but Dietrich was uncontrollable. She'd show up to events with her latest female companion, daring anyone to say something about it. She lived openly with her daughter and a rotating cast of lovers, creating a household that was unconventional, even by Hollywood standards. Dietrich's legacy isn't just in her films, it's in the way she lived. She proved that you could be authentically yourself and still be a star, as long as you were smart about it. She gave the public just enough scandal to keep them interested, while keeping her deepest truths for herself and the people she loved. Cesar Romero. Cesar Romero was Hollywood's most charming eternal bachelor, and everyone was perfectly fine with that, as long as nobody looked too closely at why he never settled down. For over 60 years, Romero danced around questions about his personal life with the same grace he brought to his dancing roles, but the truth was hiding in plain sight. Born to Cuban parents, Romero broke into Hollywood during the 1930s as a Latin lover type, but he quickly proved he was more versatile than the studios expected. He could do comedy, drama, musicals, and later became beloved as the Joker in the 1960s Batman TV series. But through it all, he maintained his status as Hollywood's most eligible bachelor who just never seemed to find the right woman. The reality was that Romero was gay, and he was remarkably good at hiding it. He had a system. He'd show up to premieres and parties with beautiful women, usually actresses who needed a respectable escort. He was charming, attentive, and photogenic, the perfect fake boyfriend for women who were also hiding their true selves. But Romero's real relationships were with men, and he was part of a network of gay actors who supported each other through the challenges of closeted life. He was particularly close to actor Tyrone Power, and their friendship raised eyebrows among those who knew what to look for. They vacationed together, were frequently seen at parties together, and maintained a connection that went beyond typical Hollywood friendships. What made Romero's situation unique was his ethnicity. As a Latino actor in Hollywood, he was already fighting for good roles and respect. Being openly gay would have been career suicide twice over. He had to navigate not just homophobia, but also the limited opportunities available to non-white actors in mid-century Hollywood. Romero handled it all with remarkable dignity. He never married, never had children, and never felt the need to explain his lifestyle to anyone. When reporters asked about his bachelor status, he joked that he was married to his career, or that he hadn't found the right woman yet. It was a performance, but it was also a survival strategy. He died in 1994 at age 87, having outlived most of his contemporaries and many of the attitudes that had forced him into the closet. His sexuality was never officially confirmed, but those who knew him understood that his charm and grace extended far beyond what the public ever saw. Tallulah Bankhead. If Hollywood had a patron saint of living your truth and damn the consequences, it would be Tallulah Bankhead. While other stars were carefully crafting their public images, Bankhead was scandalizing audiences with her outrageous behavior, her bourbon-soaked voice, and her complete disregard for society's rules about how women should behave. Born into Alabama aristocracy, Bankhead arrived in Hollywood with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. She'd already conquered Broadway and London's West End, and she wasn't about to let Hollywood's stuffed shirts tell her how to live her life. The studios tried to rein her in, but Bankhead was untamable. Her bisexuality was the worst-kept secret in Hollywood. She had affairs with both men and women, and she talked about them openly in a way that made studio executives break out in cold sweats. She was linked to actress Greta Garbo, writer Mercedes D'Acosta, and countless other women, but she was just as likely to be found in bed with a male co-star or a random stranger she'd met at a party. What made Bankhead dangerous wasn't just her sexuality, it was her attitude about it. She didn't sneak around or make excuses. She'd show up to parties with her latest conquest, regardless of gender, and dare anyone to say something about it. She once allegedly said, "I've tried several varieties of sex, and I prefer them all," which pretty much summed up her entire approach to life. The studios didn't know what to do with her. She was too talented to ignore, but too wild to control. They tried pairing her with respectable leading men, but Bankhead would inevitably do something outrageous that would get her in trouble. She was arrested for drunk driving, got into physical fights with other actresses, and was known to strip naked at parties just to see the reaction. But here's the thing. Bankhead's wildness was also her strength. She brought an authenticity to her performances that came from living without apology. When she played damaged women or society outcasts, she wasn't acting. She was drawing from her own experience of being someone who didn't fit society's mold. Bankhead died in 1968, having lived exactly as she wanted to live. She never married, never had children, and never pretended to be anything other than what she was, a force of nature who happened to be bisexual. Judith Anderson. Dame Judith Anderson was Hollywood's most formidable character actress, a woman who could make audiences tremble with just a look. But her most commanding performance might have been the decades-long act of maintaining her dignity while living as a lesbian in an industry that would have destroyed her for it. Born in Australia, Anderson came to Hollywood via Broadway, where she'd already established herself as a powerhouse performer. She wasn't conventionally beautiful like some of her contemporaries, but she had something more valuable, an undeniable presence. When she walked into a room, people paid attention. When she spoke, people listened. Anderson's most famous role was as the sinister Mrs. Danvers in Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca, a performance so chilling that it defined Gothic villainy for generations. But what many people didn't realize was that Anderson brought personal experience to the role. Mrs. Danvers's obsessive devotion to the deceased Rebecca wasn't just acting. It was Anderson channeling her own understanding of intense, forbidden love. Anderson's personal life was carefully guarded, but those in the know understood that she was part of Hollywood's lesbian underground. She had a long-term relationship with producer Catherine Cornell, and later with another woman whose identity she protected fiercely. Anderson never married, never had children, and never felt the need to explain her lifestyle to anyone. What made Anderson unique was her approach to her sexuality. She didn't agonize over it or try to change it. She simply lived it quietly and focused on her work. She was part of a generation of women who understood that their careers depended on discretion, but she never seemed bitter about it. She'd found a way to be herself within the constraints of her time. Anderson's career spanned 7 decades, and she worked right up until her death in 1992. She won an Emmy for her work in Santa Barbara when she was in her 80s, proving that talent and dignity could overcome any obstacle. She was made a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 1960, one of the highest honors available to a performer. When Anderson died, she was remembered as one of the greatest actresses of her generation. But those who knew her understood that her greatest performance was living with grace and dignity in a world that would have rejected her if they'd known her whole truth. These weren't just Hollywood secrets. They were human stories of love, survival, and the courage to be authentic in a world that demanded conformity. Every time you watch a classic film, remember that behind those perfect smiles were real people living complex, hidden lives. The studios may have silenced their stories, but their legacy lives on in every actor who's brave enough to live their truth. What other secrets do you think Hollywood's golden age was hiding? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from cinema's most fascinating era.